Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be proceeding on to session 3, the role of technology in driving the energy transition. We now invite His Excellency Nguyen Hong Dien, Minister of Industry and Trade, Socialist Republic of Vietnam, to deliver his keynote speech. Here it is.
Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu, hôm nay tôi rất vui mừng khi được mời tham dự diễn đàn cấp cao do Singapore phối hợp với Cơ quan Năng lượng Tái tạo Quốc tế tổ chức với chủ đề vai trò của công nghệ trong thúc đẩy chuyển dịch năng lượng trong khuôn khổ tuần lễ năng lượng quốc tế Singapore 2021. Lời đầu tiên, tôi xin được gửi tới quý vị đại biểu lời chúc sức khỏe, chúc diễn đàn cấp cao thành công tốt đẹp. Kính thưa các quý vị, Việt Nam là một trong các nền kinh tế có tốc độ phát triển nhanh ở Đông Nam Á. Hiện là một nước có mức thu nhập trung bình với dân số gần 100 triệu người và có một thị trường năng lượng rất năng động, thuộc nhóm lớn nhất ở khu vực. Hệ thống năng lượng của Việt Nam lớn thứ hai trong khu vực ASEAN về công suất lắp đặt, chỉ sau Indonesia. Tuy nhiên, sự tăng trưởng kinh tế mạnh mẽ của Việt Nam vẫn dựa trên nền kinh tế tiêu thụ nhiều năng lượng, đặc biệt là nhu cầu về điện. Trong đó, nguồn nhiệt điện than bảo đảm khoảng trên 40% tổng nhu cầu điện của toàn quốc. Thực tiễn phát triển năng lượng tại Việt Nam thời gian vừa qua đã cho thấy mục tiêu bảo đảm an ninh năng lượng quốc gia còn rất nhiều thách thức. Các nguồn năng lượng trong nước không đủ đáp ứng yêu cầu, cơ cấu nguồn đang bị mất cân đối, sự phụ thuộc vào nhập khẩu năng lượng tại Việt Nam ngày càng diễn ra lớn hơn. Đứng trước các khó khăn về bảo đảm nhu cầu năng lượng cho phát triển kinh tế xã hội, việc chú trọng chuyển dịch năng lượng, đảm bảo an ninh năng lượng quốc gia, tiến dần tới việc phát triển năng lượng bền vững, đáp ứng các cam kết quốc tế về biến đổi khí hậu, được xác định là mục tiêu then chốt và xuyên suốt trong chiến lược phát triển năng lượng quốc gia của Việt Nam. Nghị quyết số 55 của Bộ Chính trị về định hướng chiến lược phát triển năng lượng quốc gia đến năm 2030, tầm nhìn tới năm 2050, được ban hành vào tháng 2 năm 2020 với nhiều định hướng cụ thể như bảo đảm an ninh năng lượng quốc gia, làm nền tảng cho phát triển kinh tế xã hội, giảm thiểu tác động tới môi trường thông qua việc xây dựng các ưu đãi, khuyến khích về năng lượng tái tạo và hiệu quả năng lượng. Hiện nay, Bộ Công Thương đang trình Chính phủ phê duyệt quy hoạch điện lực quốc gia thời kỳ 2021-2030, tầm nhìn tới năm 2045, với những ưu tiên thúc đẩy mạnh mẽ sử dụng các nguồn năng lượng sạch, hạn chế tối đa nguồn năng lượng hóa thạch nhằm giảm tác động tới môi trường. Tuy nhiên, do các nhà máy nhiệt điện than hiện vẫn là nguồn cung cấp điện chính cho Việt Nam trong ngắn hạn, nên tiến trình giảm dần các nhà máy nhiệt điện than tới năm 2030 hoàn toàn không hề dễ dàng. Theo tính toán, tỷ lệ các nhà máy nhiệt điện than của Việt Nam sẽ giảm dần xuống mức còn khoảng 30% vào năm 2030. Nhiệt điện than sẽ dần được hạn chế và thay thế bằng các nguồn điện khí hóa lỏng hoặc các nguồn điện năng lượng tái tạo thân thiện hơn với môi trường. Các nhà máy điện khí dự kiến chiếm khoảng 27-28% tổng công suất nguồn điện vào năm 2030. Thêm vào đó, để Việt Nam chuyển dịch dần sang sử dụng các nguồn năng lượng tái tạo thay thế các nguồn điện truyền thống, ngoài các cơ chế khuyến khích phát triển điện gió, điện sinh khối, điện từ chất thải rắn và điện mặt trời, Bộ Công Thương đã nghiên cứu đề xuất luật hóa việc phát triển năng lượng tái tạo, đồng thời xây dựng các cơ chế chính sách mới cho việc phát triển một số loại hình năng lượng tái tạo cụ thể như điện gió ngoài khơi hay là các dự án điện mặt trời tự dùng tại chỗ, các dự án điện mặt trời nổi, v.v. nhằm thu hút sự tham gia đầu tư của các nhà đầu tư tư nhân hoặc tạo điều kiện hợp tác đầu tư giữa nhà nước và tư nhân nhằm đạt được những kết quả khả quan hơn, thúc đẩy phát triển năng lượng tái tạo mạnh mẽ. Dự kiến tới năm 2030, năng lượng tái tạo sẽ chiếm tỷ lệ khoảng 15-20% tổng cung năng lượng sơ cấp, trong đó các dự án điện gió, điện mặt trời sẽ chiếm tỷ lệ lớn hơn. Ngoài ra, các mục tiêu tiết giảm sử dụng năng lượng tiết kiệm và hiệu quả được đề ra trong chiến lược phát triển năng lượng cũng sẽ là một trong những mục tiêu dài hạn góp phần vào sự thành công của quá trình chuyển dịch năng lượng tại Việt Nam. Nhiều giải pháp đề ra nhằm cải thiện hành vi sử dụng điện tiết kiệm và hiệu quả, đẩy mạnh tuyên truyền, nâng cao nhận thức, trách nhiệm và thay đổi hành vi, thói quen của mọi cơ quan, tổ chức, cộng đồng và cá nhân trong việc sử dụng năng lượng tiết kiệm hiệu quả. lồng ghép các giải pháp công nghệ, kỹ thuật vào các chương trình, kế hoạch đang được Việt Nam tập trung triển khai với mục tiêu đề ra là tỷ lệ tiết kiệm năng lượng trên tổng tiêu thụ năng lượng cuối cùng so với kịch bản phát triển bình thường đạt khoảng 7% vào năm 2030 và khoảng 14% vào năm 2045, giúp giảm phát thải khí nhà kính từ hoạt động năng lượng so với kịch bản phát triển bình thường ở mức 15% vào năm 2030 lên mức 20% vào năm 2045. Kính thưa toàn thể quý vị, trong thời gian tới, Việt Nam rất cần thu hút đầu tư trong và ngoài nước vào các lĩnh vực như cơ sở hạ tầng điện khí, nguồn năng lượng tái tạo, hạ tầng truyền tải điện, áp dụng công nghệ, sử dụng năng lượng tiết kiệm và hiệu quả. Tôi tin tưởng rằng với những giải pháp đồng bộ, thực hiện định hướng chiến lược phát triển năng lượng của Việt Nam, ngành năng lượng Việt Nam sẽ được chuyển đổi mạnh mẽ theo hướng bền vững trong tương lai. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn các quý vị.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this next keynote address is delivered by the Honorable Lily D'Ambrosio, MP, Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, Minister for Solar Homes, Victoria, Australia. Minister, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be speaking to you today on day 2 of the Singapore International Energy Week. And I'm particularly happy to start the third session of the Singapore-IRENA High-Level Forum, looking at the role technology is playing in driving the clean energy transition. I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be watching today. Over the last 7 years, Victoria has led the way in embracing energy innovation and driving new energy technologies. We've seen renewable generation grow from just 10% in 2014 to more than 30% earlier this year. We are decarbonising at the sharpest rate of any major jurisdiction in Australia. We've also seen significant investment, with 30% of Australia's renewable energy jobs located right here in Victoria, making us the leading state for renewable energy employment. This is due in large part to the depth and maturity of our renewable energy and climate change policies. Through our nation-leading Climate Change Act, we were one of the first jurisdictions to legislate net zero emissions by 2050. And earlier this year, I was very proud to release our climate change strategy, which included our target to halve emissions by 2030. Last year, we announced our record $1.6 billion clean energy package, the biggest ever by an Australian state government. A centrepiece of this support is the $108 million Energy Innovation Initiative, which will support new and emerging renewable technologies, including offshore wind, in which we have world-class natural resources and renewable hydrogen. We are also developing a gas substitution roadmap, the first state in Australia to develop such a roadmap. It's a historical fact that Victoria is highly reliant on natural gas, with more Victorian households using gas for heating, hot water and cooking than any other state in Australia. Our roadmap will help reverse this and will position Victoria as the leader in gas substitution. It will show how we will shift more appliances to electricity, improve energy efficiency, reduce fugitive emissions and increase the uptake of renewable hydrogen, biogas and other sustainable emerging technologies. Victoria is particularly focused on taking advantage of digitalisation to drive innovation across our state. Data will be a crucial component of the clean energy future and will enable the creation of a smart energy system where efficiencies are maximised. We are already benefiting from the early adoption of smart meters, which has given our energy market operator crucial information about the impact of behind-the-meter technologies in our electricity network. This will enable greater penetration of residential solar and storage technologies, further driving jobs growth in this important sector. To help drive further digital innovation, we've provided $5 million in seed funding to establish the Centre for New Energy Technologies, an industry-led, not-for-profit company that delivers multi-party solutions to the challenges the energy industry is facing. We're also providing support to embed energy innovation in businesses and communities across Victoria. We're supporting neighbourhood batteries to deliver local energy storage to everyday Victorian households and businesses. This will maximise access to the solar power generated by the hundreds of thousands of solar systems installed across the state. We're also supporting Microgrid Demonstration Initiative, which is putting world-class technology into the hands of local communities. A great example is the totally renewable Yakandanda microgrid project in a small Victorian town called Yakandanda, which is reducing bushfire risk and increasing energy resilience by using highly advanced digital technology. We awarded this project over $380,000 to establish a microgrid that connected 33 households and subsidised the installation of 17 smart energy controllers, 9 residential solar and battery systems, and 5 CO2 hot water heat pumps. Thanks to this system, locals are able to access lower power prices. But more importantly, their power supply is more resilient, which is so important because this area is highly prone to bushfires, which can have massive impacts on power supply. This project is a great example of how we're using digitisation and technology to create an energy system that is both cleaner and better placed to deal with the challenges of climate change. Victoria's approach to new energy technologies shows that climate action is more than a leadership opportunity. It's a chance to create new jobs, grow new industries, and leave a safer, healthier environment for our children. We're leading the charge to a clean energy future that creates new economic opportunities and investment certainty, one that supports households, businesses, industry and communities. I'd like to congratulate the organisers today on putting together this important event. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to the final panel discussion for the day. I'd like now to invite our panelists on stage, as I mentioned their names one at a time. Firstly, we have Barbara Noonan, CEO Grid Solutions, Asia Pacific, China and Japan, GE Renewable Energy. Brian D. Bryan, Managing Director, Siemens Energy Private Limited in Singapore, Senior Vice President, Siemens Energy Asia Pacific Hub. And joining us virtually, ladies and gentlemen, will be Mozaharul Alam, Regional Coordinator, Climate Change Program, United Nations Environment Program. Also, Mandip Singh Bedi, Director, Sustainability Solutions, Angers Impact. Now, having the pleasure of moderating this session is again Tim Rockwell, Chairman, Energy and Utilities, Business Committee, British Chamber of Commerce, Singapore. Now, the entire panel is all set and ready to go, but just before we have the panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, we have a message from Mr. Minami Rio in a pre-recorded video. He is the Deputy Commissioner for International Policy on Carbon Neutrality from the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. Here it is.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Ryo Minami, Deputy Commissioner for International Policy on Carbon Neutrality, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. I would like to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to speak at the Singapore-IRENA High-Level Forum. I would also like to congratulate the Singapore government and IRENA on the success of this forum, thanks to the dedicated efforts of all involved. Today, I would like to make an intervention along with the theme of this forum, investing in an inclusive and equitable clean energy transition, with a particular focus on the role of technology. In order to achieve the goal of the Paris Agreement, we need to achieve carbon neutrality globally as early as possible. In Japan, the public and private sectors are working together to achieve the goals of carbon neutrality in 2050 and 46% emission reductions compared to 2013 level in 2030. Concretely, we will take actions to realize the energy transitions based on the Green Growth Strategy, which is an industry policy to create a virtuous cycle between economy and the environment. In order to achieve energy transitions, there are 3 important things. First, various pathways to achieve carbon neutrality on each country's different reality. Second, creation of innovation toward carbon neutrality. Third, international engagement for decarbonization in emerging countries. First, various pathways. It is most effective for us to take appropriate policies and measures in response to each country's situation on economy, society, energy, and technology development. In order to accelerate realistic energy transitions, it is important to utilize all energy sources and technologies, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and hydrogen and fuel ammonia. Second, innovation. Particularly, hydrogen is a key carbon neutral technology that is expected to be utilized in a wide range of fields such as power generation, transportation, and industry. Through its utilization, hydrogen is expected to contribute to decarbonization in various fields and lead to creation of new industries and jobs. Japan is working on the development and demonstration of advanced technologies such as the construction of a large-scale hydrogen supply chain in order to realize a hydrogen-based society. This October, Japan hosted the Hydrogen Energy Ministerial meeting for the third time. Third, engagement. It is necessary for countries to cooperate and build a mechanism to attract investment and finance. No country lags behind in the transition to a low-carbon society. Japan will provide a wide range of support for sustainable energy transitions in Asian countries based on the Asia Energy Transition Initiative, so-called AT, announced in May this year. In addition, on October 4th, as a part of Tokyo Beyond Zero Week, we held the Asia Green Growth Partnership Ministerial meeting. At the ministerial meeting, we shared the importance of innovation and international engagement. The next Tokyo Beyond Zero Week will be held in the autumn of next year. I would like to invite all of you to this series of international conferences hosted by Japan. Please join us. I hope my comment will be a useful input for all of you in today's discussion. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Minami Rio. Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Ravi, and hello, everybody, and thanks for staying on for this session. I know it's a little bit chilly in here, but yeah, let's try and raise the energy in the room for the last session of the day. I welcome that intervention from Minami-san from METI, and I think he summed up the challenges nicely, and I'm sure we'd all like to take him up on his offer to travel to Japan, a country where lots of interesting developments happening around technology. So we've got a great panel here, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do in their day-to-day lives. This is a panel on technology and the role of technology in driving the energy transition. Now, we've heard some very positive stories today, very interesting from Victoria there and from Sarawak about the changes that can happen. I was very encouraged by what's happened in Sarawak in the last decade of getting to kind of more renewables into the system. But it's not happening everywhere. And British Chamber of Commerce is the hat I'm wearing today. We've done a lot of work in this area over the last year, looking at things like carbon capture, how you get that into the system, looking at hydrogen and the challenges. And I'd quite like to have a discussion today around opportunities and challenges, if that's okay, because I'm sure that you'll tell us that the technology works, we just need to make it happen, right? So how do we do that? But I want to give the first floor to UNEP. Perhaps you could tell us, Mahaza Harul, first of all, kind of what's the gap that you see it? I mean, there is a gap, right, in terms of how the world's going to meet the climate change. But what are the technology leaps that are going to enable us to fill that gap either by 2050 or 2060 or 2025 or 2030? I mean, how quickly are we going to get there? How quickly can we leap? Perhaps if I could hand over to you. And it'd be great as well, UNEP, what do you do day to day? What's keeping you busy? That'd be really interesting to understand.
Okay, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting the UNEP and particularly me to talk about the gap, as you mentioned. As we know that under the Paris Agreement, the parties agreed that they will be submitting their national determined contribution, which is the primary means to show that how the countries is going to reduce their greenhouse gases, which will be compatible with the 1.5 degree temperature goal or the below 2 degree temperature goal. So that is the premises in terms of when we are looking into the gaps. When we looked into the gaps through analyzing all the NDCs submitted by the parties, and the gap is significant. When we looked into those NDCs, is basically reduce the gap in terms of the percentage that required for 1.5 degrees, about 11 to 14%. In terms of the gigaton gaps, it is about 20 to 23 the gigatons, the CO2 equivalent, if we compare it to the 2030 targets. Now, this is the one side of the story. But if we look into the other side of the story, which is important, our discussion in terms of the technology transition, if we look into the world, the plan and the projection in terms of the investment, there is going to be more investment in the fossil fuel. And if we look into that investment, the world is going to invest about 110% more for the fossil fuel in terms of the emission, which is going to be inconsistent with the 1.5 degree. And they will be producing more fossil fuel, is about 45%, if we compare that with the 2 degree. So that is where we stand in terms of the committing from the national level, in one hand, to reduce the greenhouse gases, on the other hand, where the investments are happening. So these two are the irony in terms of the gap, but also constraining the transition of the cleaner technology. So let me just make maybe the 4 points how we can expedite the cleaner energy technology within that broader context. One is the raising the ambition by the countries through their NDCs, so we are able to see the commitment. The second one is in terms of increasing the more investment in the cleaner technology and the renewable, not in the fossil fuel. Third area probably will help to expedite the transition is the market mechanism under the Paris Agreement, which is still an unfinished business during the COP26, hopefully is going to be done. And maybe more stricter the environmental, the regulation by the government. Now, let me just end what you asked me, that what we do on a day-to-day basis. As a normative organization, obviously, we bring this type of the knowledge to support the decision-making process, both at the national level, at the international level. We also provide the technical support to the government to expedite more the environmental issues to deal with, including the technologies. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And it's good to understand kind of exactly what you're doing sort of day to day so that we can understand what everyone's role is. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to turn now to Barbara. So Barbara, you're at GE Renewables. And tell us a little bit about technology. And technology, of course, around spurring innovation in clean energy technology. It's not just on physical assets, it's also on the digital as well, and energy efficiencies that we can achieve from that. And also making sure we're getting this fair and just transition for all. We've heard about energy access today, we've also heard about energy inclusion. But tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities as you see them from GE's point of view, and then maybe tell us a little bit about some of the hurdles, the frustrations that you're finding.
Oh my goodness, where do we start? It's great to be with you this afternoon, and as Tim said, thanks for staying. It is a little bit chilly, so I'm certainly feeling it up here. So I'm with GE in their renewable division, and really what we're looking at there is the whole range of different renewable sources of technological solutions, whether that be onshore, offshore wind, hydro, so a whole range of different types of products there. I'm actually in the grid solutions part of the organisation, and if we really think about it on the whole generation side, but we then think about the grid, we've got to really think about the whole reliability, the stability, and some of the themes that have been discussed so much this afternoon that I thought was really interesting, and they resonate very much with what we at GE are focused on, all about that affordability, reliability and sustainability. And we heard a lot about the financing, and that's where I sort of put that into the affordability piece, and really hearing that so much, it's all collaboration. It's not one of us, whether it be private sector, whether it be the governments, whether it be the financing arms, whether it be the industry associations. We've all got to come together in order to make these things accessible, to have those goals of moving into having more renewable sources that come in. From a grid solutions point of view, that's where the reliability comes in, and that is not just the physical hardware, that's not just the substations that are being upgraded, the service teams that need to be out there making certain that everything is still working, but it's an increasing use of digitization, an increasing use of managing those assets, of predicting when you're going to need to do the maintenance, what stage are all those assets at, the digital control rooms. So everything is very much moving into that much more digital age. And then if I think about sustainability, and so much talk about the people and not leaving anyone behind, such an important piece when we really think about that. So anything that we think about, it's a holistic, sustainable solution. And I guess that was one of the takeouts that I've been getting this afternoon, that energy is such an enabling part of everything we do. How we work, how we live, how we play. It touches absolutely everything, and we have a massive obligation that goes with that as to how we contribute. And technology provides an enormous number of those answers, so therefore the investment and continued investment in R&D, so that we look towards more green-based solutions, more green gas-based solutions, how we can co-develop and collaborate and really lead that way of innovation. I think I'm pretty lucky. I have a day job that I really love, and getting to work with customers, partners, governments across the region, because I look across Asia Pacific. I do call Singapore home, and it's been home for a very long time. But just a few thoughts there.
No, it's really a good introduction. And perhaps I can just ask you to expand a little bit more. So about a year ago, I attended lots of conferences, and the word collaboration came up a lot. So, you started to expand on it, but maybe you can expand on that a little bit more, because a year ago, the conversation stopped after the word collaboration. But the energy industry has got a history of being very collaborative. People use other people's infrastructure to transfer molecules, to transfer electrons. There are joint ventures which are very visible, but there's collaboration happening at all levels of it. So it's not like there isn't collaboration.
Absolutely not.
You did expand on that as well, but maybe on the R&D side of things. Are there examples like where GE is collaborating and things you can share with us?
I mean, everything on the collaboration side is where we have to go. And if you look at some of the R&D efforts that are done on creating new technologies, a lot of the work that we do around the green gases. And that is something where, of course, as a major organization, you innovate, you're developing patents. That becomes very important. But in order for that to be adopted, you've got to then be collaborating with other organizations. You've got to look at licensing agreements. You've got to look at ways that those capabilities can then really be adopted by a broader audience. It can't be the case that you're all just about creating a patent to keep for yourself, right? that's not going to work. And that's not the way we view that. So that's one way. I think the other way of looking at projects as well is how that we often look at just having an enabling part and playing different roles depending on what the need is. And I think that's the other thing. There isn't one size that fits all. And when you're in this part of the world, we have some of the most advanced economies. We look at how advanced Singapore is, Korea, Japan, Australia, my birthplace. But we then look at some of our evolving and developing nations as well. We look at places like Indonesia. We have a factory and a joint venture in Indonesia where we do a significant amount of manufacturing. And everyone needs to be brought along together. So hence back to that, don't leave anyone behind.
Yeah, thanks. That's really good, and thanks for those examples. Yeah, Brian, I'm going to come on to you. You're nodding a lot there, and
I can only agree with Barbara. As I should, we work in the exact same industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's hear it, Brian, from your perspective. And I mean, what innovation are you driving, and what gaps are you trying to fill? And then tell us about some of the frustrations. We know Singapore is a great place to live. It's relatively easy to collaborate, great university system, R&D coming through. Maybe some questions on kind of how fast the R&D is commercializing. But tell us a bit from Siemens and what you're doing day to day, and kind of what great technology you've got to plug the gaps, and what's coming, and what's frustrating you.
So, and thank you for the opportunity, Tim. Maybe I'll give you just a little bit of a background, an introduction to Siemens Energy for a very good reason. It's our birthday this month, our first year. So we spun off from our parent Siemens AG 12 months ago as a dedicated pure play energy company. And it's a wonderful opportunity because it gave us the means to focus on this industry. Very similar to what Barbara talked about, we also work across generation, industrial applications, be it petrochemicals or industrial processes, as well as, of course, transmission as well. So I think your question, Singapore is, and I guess has been for many years, a wonderful example of an ecosystem in which innovation thrives through the universities, through A-STAR, through all of those other initiatives as well. But I think we heard some remarkable examples today, like I touch upon in Vietnam. We heard the representative from METI just a few minutes ago. And I see a tremendous amount of progress in Northeast Asia in particular, with government intervention driving specific policies, which is then the impetus for private companies such as ourselves to really get involved. And I'll give you, if I could, a couple of examples of that kind of collaboration between private company.
Yeah.
I mean, one is in Japan, for example, so it's quite relevant to the METI example, where we're collaborating with Toray to produce a new membrane technology for electrolyzers for the production of hydrogen. And I think with their industry know-how, if you like, and Toray's chemical know-how, it's a good solution of companies coming together to share and, find a solution to a common goal. We have another example a little closer to home here in Singapore, and I'll give a little plug to the EMA if I can here, given that they were our gracious hosts. But they've been working across the industry here in Singapore to encourage the adoption of more energy efficient technologies, which is then, gave rise to much more significant collaboration between ourselves as an OEM, EMA as a government body, and some of our customers as well, to develop specific projects to improve energy efficiencies at those plants. So I guess the devil is always in the details, or perhaps it's more in the incentive that's used, but nevertheless it does produce results. And we have seen quite a few examples. I mean, in terms of some of the technologies, hydrogen is an interesting one, of course. It's very topical. Everybody is talking about hydrogen now, and rightly so. It still feels as if the infrastructure is perhaps still in catch-up mode. We're waiting to get there, but again, going back to that electrolyzer technology example, industry is rushing in anticipation of seeing a similar growth in hydrogen, as was the case perhaps with solar and wind power not too long ago. And then, Barbara, you mentioned digitalization as a topic as well. Again, another extremely important one. When we think about, digital tools or processes, we tend to think in terms of predictive maintenance, for example, for equipment, which is extremely important and was the foundation for many digital developments. But I think it extends beyond that now. We heard the minister from Australia talk about energy efficiency and smart metering. Another wonderful and I think underappreciated example of where technology can make a fundamental shift, not only in industry, but in people's behaviors as well. So it's a wonderful thing. And distributed generation, the management of how that plugs into the grid, how you maintain that stability and affordability and reliability you talk about is extremely important. And also, I think all of these digital tools come together or are coming together to create a platform where companies and governments can make much more intelligent decisions about investment in specific projects. The degree of insight it provides, I think, allows us to make smarter decisions about what kind of project, what generation technology, how is it going to operate, where is it best located. It just, is another good example, I think, and is something that's a little bit more exciting perhaps than some of the topics we've talked about.
I've been here in Singapore, so it's the EMA's birthday as well, right? 20 years, so congratulations, EMA. And I was reading the book that was produced and handed out yesterday. So it said in there the EMA, and I'm looking at the chief executive here, has granted $200 million in grants since its existence. So congratulations on that. But when I hear about the trillions that are needed for energy transition and to get there, $200 million is a good start. But we're in Singapore, but what about the region and connecting the region? Yesterday we were talking a lot about interconnectivity and moving green molecules across the wires in the region. Talked about storage as well. You touched briefly on that. I mean, storage and interconnectivity, do the two go together and how do they work best and how do they ensure that electrons are going to where they're needed?
Right place.
Yeah. You were very positive there, Brian. Let's talk about some of the hurdles and frustrations. Does that 200 million over the last, does that need to be 2 billion, 20 billion? I'm sure the UN would tell us it needs to be 2 trillion, but...
Well, if we're negotiating, we could start there, certainly. I mean, that seems
we can always add more zeros, yes.
Exactly. But is there more that's needed to be done, particularly in the ASEAN region, where, let's face it, there still are millions of people who can't switch on a light bulb?
I think we've heard some wonderful examples about specific projects, cross-border projects. But I think the unfortunate thing is they're specific projects or they're specific examples. And I think if it were possible to see much more developed and coherent, perhaps, government policies linking the different entities, the different ministries, the different regulatory authorities in each of these countries together so that collectively there could be a common policy, I think that would make a tremendous difference. So while we see the green shoots, if you like, in some specific projects, I think a much broader and probably higher level approach is needed to really overcome some of these barriers.
Well, that's a good ask, and we'll take note. I want to go to Amandeep, who's waiting there virtually. So Amandeep, we haven't forgotten about you. You're from Engie, and of course Engie's got a very big presence in the region and the regional headquarters here in Singapore. First of all, where are you? Can you tell us a little bit about Engie Impact, which I believe you work for, and some of the opportunities and challenges that you're seeing from a technology perspective, please?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As discussed, I work with Engie Impact. Engie Impact is an offshoot of Engie. We are actually an advisory consulting firm focusing exclusively on decarbonization as a topic. So our sort of core reason for existence is to support clients, organizations, and governments in accelerating their decarbonization with a strong focus on energy, water, and waste. That's the core of our work. Now, in terms of some of the things that we're seeing happen across the market, there's definitely a lot of interest from clients. You can imagine there's varying degrees of maturity across multiple sectors. The technology sector seems to be a little more ahead. Unfortunately, the oil and gas downstream sector still needs to catch up in terms of formally announcing plans and showing sort of roadmaps and investment plans that drive towards our decarbonization. And they have a large stake in this, given the sort of footprint that the industry produces. Key challenge that I see is that people are still looking for, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. And I think, as Mozaro rightly pointed out, people will have to share their ambitions and sort of, one at the national level, but we also need to see companies up their ambition in terms of their willingness to commit, be it through pilot projects on specific things like carbon capture or hydrogen, or through investments in innovation. But more and more action needs to be taken to kickstart the process, because everyone's waiting for the right regulatory driver or the market driver to start moving. And that basically means that, all stakeholders are waiting for someone else to move first, and it slows down action.
No, thank you very much for that. And I want to go back to Mazaharo from the UN. You've heard there from 3 private sector companies who are doing a lot in the region, and they're all very excited around the role of technology. But it needs to happen, right? We've heard a lot about mechanisms and policy frameworks. I mean, I've never written a policy framework in my life, but there are people who do this type of thing. So having heard what the private sector has to say, what's the position from the UN in terms of these carbon taxes, carbon revenues, diverting them back into the sector? What's the mechanisms for doing that? What's your reflections on what you've heard?
Thank you. Maybe I will touch upon 2 things, Tim. One is what I have heard from the Siemens colleague and also Amandeep. In terms of the transition, obviously it requires policy environment, it requires the technology, which in many cases is very mature. It also requires finance, but also one of the things what we have seen and noticed from the government side is the job. So it is not that who will start first. I think it is important, the policy, the finance, technology, and transition of the job, they needs to go hands in hand. It is not that somebody will start and then I will jump. I think all these, the 4 areas, they need to work together. It is not waiting for one to start. So that's the first thing. I think the Siemens colleague rightly mentioned about, if we look into the least developed countries or the countries of the growing economy, is the market size for many technologies is small. But that requires the regional collaboration, and in many cases, the harmonization of the policies and approach will create the larger market, and that will help the private sector to also invest more, because they will be able to see the size of the market larger than one single country by another single country, but seeing as a regional. So that the harmonized approach in the policies, the standard, will also expedite that the growth of the cleaner technologies. So that would be my reflection in terms of what we see necessary in all 4 areas.
Thank you very much for that, as the clock ticks to 0. But I think maybe if I can steal a little bit of time just to get final thoughts from everyone. And I go to you first, Anandeep. Perhaps just your reflections. First of all, you have to give it in 30 seconds, but what would your ask be to the people in the room as to how can, you talked about the downstream industry, for instance, you picked that one out. What are the asks to enable more technology to accelerate the energy transition?
I think it will be a mix of the right regulatory support going along with sort of taking leadership and ownership of driving this, and working in collaboration and coordination with regulators, industry players. These 3 things would matter a lot in basically driving this.
That's good. I'll stop you there. I'll let Barbara have the last word. But
okay. So just
no. The last word.
Oh.
The last word.
Oh.
Yeah. So Brian next.
Oh.
I think for the same question, I think experimentation. right? Pilot projects. Being able to look at specific technologies in controlled environments, seeing how they work out. That would be my ask. More pilot projects, more experimentation.
Yeah. Who's going to finance those pilot projects?
Well, luckily, I mean, in Singapore, I guess we have some direction, right? But you know, it's interesting. It's not just a government question, right? I think there's an opportunity for private companies and governments to collaborate specifically on these pilot projects because it benefits both. We get the opportunity to put our technology into a real-life environment. The government or the authority gets to understand how it operates in practice. There's much more room for this, I think.
That's great. And Barbara, finally to you, the final word.
My last comment.
Yeah, your comment and an ask to the group. You know, we've got the Deputy Executive Director of IRENA here. We've got head of the Energy Market Authority. We've got lots of very interested people in the room.
I think the energy transition is now. There are many things that have gone on for the last decade, 2 decades. The ask that I would have, we have lived through extraordinary times in the almost 2 years of the pandemic. Things that we thought were absolutely impossible, that couldn't be done. Vaccines created in the timeframes that have been created. I think that if we looked at this through a different lens and took that very view that we can do things differently, we could move so much more quickly on the energy transition instead of being defined by what we think can't be done and the necessary process and all the steps, but we pivot and we go in the same way that we have been forced to reinvent every aspect of ourselves for the almost last 2 years.
Well, thank you. And I leave the panel very upbeat. I think a little bit more upbeat than I was earlier this afternoon, actually. So very positive examples that we heard. And I think, you know, that Singapore demonstrates, you know, that it has got the skill sets, it's got the institutions, it's got the companies here and people prepared to make a difference. So I'm really positive about that. So with all of these anniversaries and birthdays, we should probably get some cake out, I think, and celebrate. But thank you very much for having us. And it's been a pleasure to sit here on behalf of the British Chamber of Commerce. And do look at our website and some of the exciting panels and conversations that we've done on hydrogen, carbon capture, scaling up, which we didn't talk about scale, but we should probably have mentioned the word scale there. So with that, thank you very much to the EMA and to IRENA, and I hand back to Ravi. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Tim, for managing this very lively discussion. Thank you all very much.